items on the agenda to talk about. So if you would please stand with me for the pledge. Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. We have kind of a full agenda today. We're fortunate to have Larry Lee here, and we're going to talk about a project that he has and share that information with the board, and then we'll follow up with that with a charter school update on some information regarding our charter schools. Then I'm going to have Helen, and that'll be done by Dr. Prince. Then I'm going to have Dr. Wild come up, and we'll talk a little bit about the best standards that have just come out from the state of Florida and how we understand that. Also then kind of doing legislative update. Mrs. Hensley was in Tallahassee last week, and we got something from Vern this morning regarding some legislation from Senator Harrell, and so I have Helen on standby for that as well. And then we'll have a private attorney-client in the shade meeting. We'll go upstairs to the superintendent's conference room for just the board to discuss some possible issues as well there. Okay? So welcome to everyone, and happy to have Larry here this morning. He showed up just in time for kickoff. And so we've got this issue. We got a program. It's called the Lighthouse Project. And this is up in Garden City. I'm going to turn over to Larry and let him kind of go ahead and give you some information. We also have Will Armstead here from Boys and Girls Club. That's somewhere in the gallery. And so Larry, welcome.
Well, first, thank you, Superintendent Janton, and board members. Thank you for allowing me this honor. But before I get started, I'd like to commend you. I attended an event Saturday, and Donna Mills mentioned to the audience the accomplishments that this board and this superintendent has had in the area of education, and it was very much of an honor for me when I was in the legislature to stand on the floor when all of these numbers start flowing. So you're to be commended. The progress that we've made with our graduation rate is to be commended, and I think oftentimes the public is not made aware of this, and our schools are not given the due credit that is due. And to have no failing schools, I am reminded of Speaker Cochran and his schools of hope. And I say, you know, why schools fail is they are not getting the proper funding. And if you continue this proliferation of these charter schools, and I'm not beating up on charter schools, but many times while I was in the legislature, they pull funds from the funds that would normally be going to the public school system to fund some of those programs. But I just wanted to open up with that and just say I thank you on behalf of the constituents and citizens of St. Lucie County. I just want to tell you, I think all of you are aware of this. My first year in the legislature, I started an initiative called Restoring the Village. And I grew up in the Lincoln Park area. This is in the heart of the Lincoln Park area. And over a period of decades, that community became very depressed. And people began to lose hope. You start seeing a lot of decline in the neighborhood, and particularly in the area of Pride. And when I grew up there, that community was not called Northwest Fort Pierce. It was called the Lincoln Park community. So we started this rebranding process, and you'll see a beautiful sign on 25th Street that says, "Welcome to the Village of Lincoln Park." And we started thinking like a village. So I was asked to meet with a guy by the name of Anthony Coletta, who's with First Tee, and to learn about that program and about golf and how golf, the First Tee program had 9 core principles. And when I studied what they were doing, I said, man, this is nice. It's not just about golf. It's about life skills and everything that they were learning in this program. And they take kids from areas like Lincoln Park, urban communities, and they take them to the golf course and introduce them to golf and all that comes with golf. And I said, well, rather than take the kids to the course, why not bring the course to the community? And that was the birth of this idea. That property there, that 5.42 acres, had been offered to one of my investment groups a few years ago, and we decided not to move on it. But then I said, what a great place for that to be. And If I may stand, 'cause do you have that, the actual layout? Okay, good. Let's go back to the first piece.
Yeah, let me just say, the first picture that's there, you can see the current usage of Garden City. You can see the ALPI, the Head Start, the Pride, the program that we put in this year with our K through 5 students that are over there with some special needs as well, and then you can see the annex. So that's what's currently at the school site. Did you want to stay there, Larry, or? Okay.
So when we looked at this, we said, man, and I didn't know nothing about golf, but a guy by the name of Jim Fazio, if any of you know about golf course design, Jim Fazio was one of the top golf course designers in America. They designed Legacy out here, and the Together Brothers, they are some of the big golf course builders in the country. So they all came to me and said that they would be willing to work, and you'll see in the presentation what has transpired since that initial meeting. So we put together this, and it was amazing because the guy who Fazio and Anthony Kalita brought to the table had designed a project similar to this one in Palm Beach County 6 years ago. And when he said, I got exactly what you need, and when he rolled that out, I said, this is unbelievable. It's almost like he took this site. The only difference was it was off about 100 feet deep and a few feet wide, but it was laid out the same way, and it was just miraculous how that happened. So when we thought about doing this, we said, you know, wouldn't it be nice, since 25th Street next to US 1 is perhaps the most traveled north-south corridor now. People are leaving in River County, coming to Port St. Lucie, and vice versa. And we wanted to put a showcase in the black community so that when people ride by there, it gives them a sense of pride, and it becomes a spark for other things that happen on that corridor. And I envision Royal Palms all along this road, just like you would see going into an exclusive golf course community. Now, if you follow the Restoring the Village and you look at that sign on 25th Street and the one at Sheridan Plaza, you'll see Royal Palms. That's a theme of ours. They're royal because they are the best. You know, they self-clean. And those palms were donated by Gary and Bud Roberts. So I called Bud, I said, we got another project we need your help on. And so they volunteered to help us with the palms. This is up around here, but we may have to buy the ones down here. So we wanted to make this such a beautiful thing, and one lady told me, I heard you trying to do a golf course in the Lincoln Park community. And I said, yes. She said, black kids don't play golf. I said, they don't play it because they haven't been introduced and exposed to it. This right here would change that, help change that. Once we came up with this idea, we decided that we needed to make sure, because I didn't want to create a foundation and try to run this thing, because many times when you create something, when you die, if you don't have a succession plan, that project dies. And one of the problems that the King family is having in Atlanta right now, part of the family want to keep that King Center and manage it. The other part want the Park Service. Well, if the Park Service does it like they do the Washington Monument and others, it's kept in perpetuity. So this is what we decided to do, was team up with an organization that has been around 150 years, and they work with kids, and that's where Will came in at. So we teamed up with the Restoring the Village Initiative, the First Tee program, which is a national program, and the Boys and Girls Club. This facility will be owned and operated by the Boys and Girls Clubs when we get it completed. Right here, this is the property that we're discussing this morning. This piece right here, we're putting under contract, and the owners have agreed to sell it to us with some nice terms. And right here, you see the Royal Palms. Right here, coming into, this is the Boys and Girls Clubhouse. This is a putt-putt golf course. This parking. And right here is a 9-hole par 3 course. It's more like an executive course if you know anything about golf. It's going to be a bit different than a traditional golf course. Golf courses are very expensive to maintain because you have turf management. You got to put that turf down. You're going to have $150,000 built in the equipment cost just before you hit the first ball. Then you gotta build a shed, then you gotta stock it with herbicides, pesticides, and all of that stuff to maintain that green. This one would be an AstroTurf, just like you see on a pro football field. They last 15 to 20 years. So it would be kind of interesting. These areas right here, these are all AstroTurf, and here will be a little rough, but that's what you see, AstroTurf and AstroTurf all in here. Now, if you want to see what this will look like, right in, if you go through the gate, and if any of you need a pass to get in, I can get you a pass. But go to the Legacy Golf Course, and you will see this. It's beautiful. It's a putt-putt golf course that they have back in the Legacy Club, and Jim Fazio, they did that too. And this thing has really taken, and Will can tell you also, we are amazed at the number of people and organizations that's getting behind this. We had the Fazios, they did all of this drawing free of charge. They're designing this course free of charge. We have Gettler Brothers, who actually designed Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan has a 200-acre golf course in Hope Sound that they just recently built down there. And they did his, but they're coming. Not only are they going to do the construction work, but they donated $5,000 to also help purchase the land. Right here, this property all was being unused by the school board, so it was ideal because right now it's just grass out there and trees. So we wanted to use as much of this, and I think this is about 0.83 acres.
0.86.
Or 0.86 acres. You can round it off to an acre if you want.
Yeah, give me an acre.
So,
It's tax time.
So what happened was this is what we've carved out for this section of the course. Right here, we would like to, even though we don't own this, we would like to take these royal palms and just beautify this part of the school board's property, just to make from Avenue Q, right here, Avenue Q, all the way down to almost the canal. And that's sort of the project. And Will, I don't know if you have any questions for him, but we're working on a, Will told me, say, Larry, we started raising money and didn't even have a business plan. We had people just writing checks, you know, to this project. But yesterday we met, and we're going to start our capital campaign of about $2 million to do the overall project. So that's kind of where we are. Any questions?
If I may, Madam Chair, Children's Services Council has been first team, and so we have done significant due diligence over the years for the outcomes. We were skeptical at the beginning because of the philosophy and to see if it could actually work, and we now know that it does. Along with that, you would know this, but the 4-H extension agent, we've been trying to find something to put into that community that would spark the kids and do something unique. So I think that also meets that piece. So I think for me, it's an easy call.
Madam Chair, with this being done, would this be open to the entire community, or is it just the Boys and Girls Club? And second part of the question, and you may not have this answer right now, but is there a cost for that, for just the putt-putt? Not this, I know it would be a cost for the large thing, but the kids golf.
Well, you know, and Will, you want to come up? Actually, the answer to your first question, 50% of the kids that use this must come out of this area. It'll be open to all kids of the county, but at least 50% must come out of that area. The kids will not have to pay anything. They're in the club, the Boys and Girls Clubs. And this right here, we want to create a little business for the kids. If this is done, as Will and I have talked, and we also working with the community foundations of Martin and St. Lucie County, this will be the only Boys and Girls Club facility in the country that has its own golf course and its own revenue generator. We're gonna provide jobs for the kids. The kids will run this. So I think Putt-Putt Golf, they got one over here they just did in Traditions, and I think it's called Pop Shot. I think Pop Scroll. And I think it's like $15 or something like that to play or something like that. But these kids will actually run this, so it provides them with jobs, but it also provides revenue. But that's the only part there. But Will, you want to make any comments?
I think I will tell you, Dr. Mills, that a kid is a kid is a kid, and they're all of our kids. So while Boys and Girls Clubs would maintain it, it's going to be open to all the kids in the community. And so we want to get as many partners to bring kids by, because not only will it help with the kids that are on the property, but we would love for, at some point, even if schools would come over and enjoy that facility at the same time, so it's for all kids.
Will there be a charge to the organizations that work with kids to?
We're still writing out the business plan, but the kids that are part of Boys and Girls Clubs, it's like we do at our other clubs. There's that one fee that they pay, and it's a $25 fee for the entire year. So it would be very similar to that for those kids too. But for the kids that are coming in, it really is going to be about us putting a business plan together, but the cost would be minimal.
I might also add too that we're going to have sponsor organizations. So if there's a kid, Jerome is partners with us. Jerome is part of the Restoring the Village board, but we have business partners. So if a kid wants to go there, we're going to find a way to get them there. That 2.5 million is really, I think, about 1.5 that we really want to do, but we want to do an endowment. That endowment, once we overshoot our budget, everything else goes into an endowment. And if there are kids out there that needs to be a part of this or want to join or have it, we're going to make that work.
I know this is like a different subject, so this will be a great area also to add some tennis courts, because I don't think the Lincoln Park area has tennis courts.
Let me make a comment on that. When we first started this, one of the things that we did not want to do, Troy, we didn't want to step on anybody's feet. People that were doing something, we wanted to try to bring something to the community and not duplicate something that's already there. So we wanted to think outside of the box. That's why you don't see anything like this anyway, St. Louis County, actually, for kids and what we're envisioning. The reason we didn't touch the tennis courts because over at the Lincoln Park Recreation Center, they have a tennis court. And then also, Reuben Johnson has been working with Black youth drown more than any other ethnic group. And Reuben wanted us to include a swimming pool here, but there's a swimming pool at the Lincoln Park. So we were trying to stay away from anybody else's turf and try to create something pretty unique. We think we've done it here. Now, what has happened, Wayne, can you go back to the first one? Slide. One of the things that we kind of would love to do, that's okay.
Is that, am I not there?
I say, Superintendent and I got a lot in common. We're technologically challenged at times. Yes, right here. Now, what we would love to have done is taken a little bit more of this land out by the fence along that road and put a soccer field. Because I don't think there's a soccer field in the Lincoln Park area, is it? I don't know. Now, Lincoln Park, the school has one, but that's, it's not open to the public. It's just a really? Okay. But in that, yeah, that was mentioned just yesterday that maybe we should start.
Don't be shaking your head, yes.
Okay.
You should go there and watch it.
So, questions?
One step at a time, Larry.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, so maybe we get that. Yeah, we're just here for this thing.
So for the board, let me redeem myself. Okay, so what they would be requesting is, you can see the Garden City, we have 16.88 acres there. They would be requesting about an acre. You would still see what's left over. School board policy is a minimum of 15 acres. We don't really see any issues with the current use of the facility, even if future expansion, that we could be a good partner with Larry and the group. So I just wanted to share this with the school board, answer any questions you have, and with your permission, just kind of move forward with me working with them and working through our legal department.
Consensus of the board to move forward?
So moved.
Second.
Okay?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, and we would like to let you know when we're gonna have the groundbreaking. So we'll keep you in the loop on every step that we make. Thank you all so much for your
Okay.
support.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Will, for coming over as well this morning. Thank you for those nice comments. Okay, we're going to shift gears now. And I know there's been some questions in the past couple of months, and we've been regarding some of our charter schools. And we have talked particularly in the area of instructional staff and how many instructional staff members there are and other issues. So I thought it'd be important this morning just to have a conversation with the board to give you some updated information that we have, to share that with the board, to answer any questions that you would have, so that you would just be have the latest information that we have regarding that. And I'm going to bring Dr. Prince up to wherever you. This is fine. And Jonathan and Raphael as well.
It's my muscle. Good morning. It's good to see our board members. So I want to take you through a couple of things with regards to our charter schools and also kind of give you an update on our out-of-field teachers and how we compare with our charter schools. So last month, you just approved a list of out-of-field teachers, and that was on the last board meeting. So just to kind of explain real quick, what is defined as an out-of-field teacher, they have to be qualified for the course that they're teaching, okay? I also want to remind you that these are certified teachers. An out-of-field teacher is a certified teacher. They're just teaching a course that they're not certified to teach.
And let me just interrupt real quick to set I think I did, but maybe I didn't do well enough. So when the board approved that, each year you have to approve the out of field, and then there's a process that we have to follow. And so there were several questions from the board members regarding how does this affect the charter schools. Thus, why we're here today, to update you on that and to give you information.
So they have a limited time that they have to get in field. That means they may have to take a course, they may have to take a test, but there's a limited amount of time that teachers have to get in field for whatever course that they're teaching. And we have to notify the board. We also have to do a parent notification for out-of-field teachers. So an example that I'd like to give maybe for an out-of-field teacher is, let's say a teacher is certified to teach math grades 6 through 9. They would be certified to teach a 9th grade math course, which is algebra. But if, let's say, there's one section of geometry that they're teaching, they would be technically out of field, and they would go on that out-of-field list for the state, and those students would need to receive a letter. So there's an important distinction to make with out-of-field teachers and substitute teachers. So when a substitute is attached as a teacher of record for a course, that course is out of field, okay? But a substitute teacher is not an out-of-field teacher because they're not a certified teacher to begin with, so they're technically not an out-of-field teacher. The state sees it as the course as being out of field. Also, for the state to see that the course is out of field, the substitute has to be attached to the course as the teacher of record. So in some instances, if the substitute is not attached to the course, they're literally invisible to the state, and so is the course. Also, legislation doesn't necessarily address whether parent notification is required if you have a substitute teaching there in front of students. So going back to substitute teachers and out of field, I also want to remind the board, you may not know this, but for substitute teachers, the state legislation says, and this is important for you to hear and understand, that to sub in the state of Florida, all you need is a GED or a high school equivalent, all right? Our district, you have to have an AA degree, and it varies from district to district, but the bottom line is for charters, in our district, it's not very clear on their website what their requirements are to be a substitute teacher in charters, and that's statewide. But for our district public schools, they have to have an AA degree. So I want to talk about the compliance process because we just had a list that you received and you approved our out-of-field teachers. So the board approval has to occur for all out-of-field teachers. And the teachers are also notified of actions that they have to take in order to get certified or rectify the out-of-field status. They're listed on our website. So if you go under parents and the students page, there's literally a hot link that you can go and see all of the out-of-field teachers in our public schools. So the courses taught out of field, they're reported, and the teachers who do not comply with getting their certification status updated can be non-reappointed. Now, what we normally do, our business practice is, if they're, let's say, I gave you the example of the algebra teaching geometry. We would not non-reappoint that teacher. We would just adjust their schedule once the time expired so that they were only teaching courses that they were certified to teach. So the out-of-field compliance for charters is exactly the same. I'm not going to read this to you because it's exactly the same as ours, with one distinction, and that's on the very top line, is that charter schools are not required to list their out-of-field teachers on their websites, whereas we are required to list our out-of-field teachers on our website. So this is where we get to the crux of what we want to inform the board about, is with regards to the breakdown of St. Lucie Public Schools. And we have 38 public schools, and 97% of our teachers are certified teachers. 90% are in field, 7% are out of field, and that could include teachers that are teaching secondary that only have one section of something that are out of field. And we have 70 substitutes district-wide. I'd also like to say, and that's 3% of our instructional workforce. I'd also like to say out of those 70 subs, 22 of those folks were certified teachers. Their certification lapsed, they didn't pass an exam, but they remain, and we're trying to support and assist them in getting certified so that they are certified. And we also have teachers that are on FMLA that we have substitutes in for them. But we do have some critical teacher shortage areas in ESE. They might be music or specialty math, especially in secondary, that we have some challenges with. But if you look at our comparison with the charters, about 63% of their instructional staff are teachers. They have 12% out of field, and then 37% of the instructional workforce are substitutes. Now, if we break this down further, and I just want to remind you, 3% of our teachers in our district are substitutes, but if we looked at our 4 charters, they don't necessarily mirror us. Remember, 3% of our workforce are substitutes. 2 of our charters are comparable. And then we have 2 charters that a substantial percentage of their instructional workforce are substitutes. And I want to remind the board that we don't have any control over their hiring practices, nor do we have any control over their business practices. So we had talked about charters last year. All charters sent a copy to HR of their out-of-field parent notification letters. There was a question we had last year with regards to how do we monitor our charter schools. And HR is coaching the charter staff to improve the letter's adherence to state technical assistance. We've also added a workshop where we've invited our charter schools to come in January for certification information sessions to assist them in making sure they're getting parents the correct information for audit purposes. And also, we're implementing a principal verification form that says that the principals are signing off the charter saying that we're complying with the law.
Let's,
Yep.
on that specific, are there any questions for Dr. Prince or the staff regarding that issue?
Madam Chair, the charter schools, I think I heard you say that with us, our subs need to have an AA degree.
Correct.
Okay. Charter school subs does not, or we don't know, or what?
The bottom line, it's not very clear. It's not posted on their website with what the requirements are to be as substitutes in either of the charter operating companies that we have. So it's unclear what qualifications that they have to be a substitute. In our public schools, they have to have an AA degree. And the state legislation is that if you're in front of kids, you at least have to have a high school equivalent diploma or a GED.
And I think what's important there too, and Dr. Prince mentioned it, within where we have the 70 subs that are there, which is really a small number for a district our size, about 22 to 25, it's certification issues. So they've received training to be teachers, and they've gone through the process. And we do courses or classes for teachers to help them to pass the subject area exam, which has been a point of contention, and we've had that conversation before regarding that. So it's not like they're just, when you think of subs, you're just thinking of the one person that comes in to help assist that has an AA, but many of ours have had the 4-year degree. They're just in the process of trying to be certified or recertified. So they've gone through the teacher training program.
Madam Chair, one of the pieces of that as well is the ESOL. Is that still showing teachers out of field that aren't certified in ESOL? Is that correct? No, I mean in general, when we say that teachers are out of field, aren't many of the cases that they're still finishing the ESOL training?
That could be some of them, yeah.
I think that is.
But we didn't include them in our number, did we?
You
We
didn't
did not.
include
We
them
did
in
not
that.
include the
Okay,
ESOL,
okay,
because there's
okay.
a lot of ESOL.
Right, because that's an
Exactly.
ongoing issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we move on to the other issue? Okay. So the second issue that we wanted to make the board aware of is the Renaissance St. Lucie enrollment issues. Now, in multiple areas in the charter, or the approved charter, they have a maximum enrollment cap of 1,290 students. That's mentioned multiple times, and our student assignment, once they reach their maximum enrollment, no longer approves additional students to get enrolled at the school. Now, for the last 7 years, they've started out the school year at Renaissance St. Lucie with more than 1,290 students on their campus. Now, for all intents and purposes, we're going to refer this as warehousing, okay, this practice. So this warehousing of students consists of anywhere between 3 and 10 students, and let me tell you how the process works. So they hit their cap of 1,290, and what they do is they allow students to start school there without being enrolled. They have a different operating system. We use Skyward. They use something else. And basically what it is whenever they have an opening, let's say a student, we have a high mobility rate. So whenever a student moves and goes someplace else, they have somebody on deck on campus that they'll just slide into that spot. Now, how do we know about this practice is they basically have self-reported the practice because their operating company, Charters USA, calls our student assignment, and they wonder why we're not enrolling a student. And we have to remind them that their cap is 1,290 students and that they can't exceed that cap. So we've raised this issue in the past with them, and this has kind of been a back and forth between the district and Renaissance St. Lucie. So each year we have informally discussed options to resolve the issue, but we would always reach an impasse. Now, in September of last year, Renaissance St. Lucie requested FLDOE-sponsored mediation in an effort to try to resolve the issue. Now, this is why it's really become critical this year. This year, we believe that up to 20 students have been warehoused, that it's getting more and more students. And in the meantime, the mediation effort was unsuccessful. Now, the bigger concern that we have and why we're having this conversation with the board is, first of all, neither the district nor Renaissance can claim FTE for a student that is not enrolled, okay? If the student's enrolled, they're just sitting on a campus, they're going to classes, they're kind of informally there, but they're not officially enrolled with us, so we can't claim FTE for them, and neither can the charter school. And it's just a practice where as soon as a student leaves, they can just insert somebody else. The more critical issue, though, is it came to our attention this year that 2 of the students that this practice was being used with are special education or special needs students. And it exposes our liability with this practice to Renaissance St. Lucie and the district to claim that the student has been denied free appropriate public education because the IEP must be serviced when the student is enrolled. And because we can't see the student is being enrolled, nor can we see them serviced, that becomes an issue. And we're currently investigating this issue with the school to determine whether or not the students were receiving their services. And that's a big deal. So,
We've been in conversation with the school. Jonathan Ferguson is here as well. In front of you is a letter that I had asked Jonathan to send to the charter school when this was brought to my attention, because there was, this has been handled at the staff level, I guess, over the last couple of years. When I found out about it really this fall, was very concerned that we shouldn't have any students that aren't counted for FTE. And then, so in the negotiations with the school, and I won't speak for Jonathan, but we went to an impasse regarding that. And then when we found out regarding the ESE students, that raises the level as well. And so I thought it was important that our board members were aware of this. You have the letter in front of you that was brought forward. We'll be meeting after this meeting regarding the legality of this and potential legal action from both sides regarding this. I did meet with some representatives from the charter school group back in December, and we really didn't get anywhere with that. We just had some general conversations regarding it's Charter Schools USA, correct? That's
Yes, sir.
the Renaissance. So, and what's important to note that it's really for this school only, Renaissance St. Lucie. This doesn't affect the other Renaissance and Tradition or the Somerset schools. This is the ESE issue, and the not reporting of the appropriate FTE is really limited to this one school. But again, to have students that aren't counted in FTE and then to have special needs students is just something that we cannot have. Any questions from the board members? And the letter, again, is right in front of you.
Awareness that their child is warehoused?
we don't know the answer to that question. Student assignment doesn't handle the enrollment of students at charter schools. That's done by the charters. We handle getting them enrolled in our system in Skyward. So students that are dealing with the charters, up until they send their names to us that they're enrolled, unless we get a phone call asking why they're not enrolled, we have no clue how many students we're talking, nor do we really know if the parents know.
Madam
So
Chair,
you did,
do we know if this is a statewide issue at all, or is this very, very pinpointed?
Do not know, and maybe Dr. Ferguson could respond, because I don't know how many charters have an enrollment cap.
Don't know if it's a statewide issue, but not all charters have a hard cap. A lot of the charters in the new model charter propounded by the state puts the cap at the physical capacity of the school and not a hard number.
Okay, thank you.
What's the physical capacity of the two charters?
That's not real clear. We have a number for Renaissance St. Lucie based on fire code capacity, but
They don't do a fish count study?
no. And they're not bound by the SRF standards when they build, and so the only standard that we know of is the class size, but that's done on a school-wide average. So again, we don't even know really what their true physical capacity would be.
And in our charter, isn't it true that in not the charter, but the contract, it's 1290 is the cap?
We negotiated a firm hard number based on their original application, which was back in 2008, and they've agreed to it, and that charter's been renewed twice with the hard cap number in there. And
So-
the other Renaissance school also has a hard cap number. That's just was the policy of the board. Renaissance agreed to it.
And then and then they have approached to increase that number. But when this is something for the board, when you look at the number of certified people and substitutes on campus, that creates an issue regarding you want to increase the enrollment. but the extraordinary high number of subs on the campus would cause one to pause and to really, look deeper into that.
Dr. Mills had a question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The warehouse students at Renaissance, just to clarify, we're saying that there are 2 of them that are IEP, that do not have IEPs because of being warehouse students?
We are aware, Mr. Tomlinson became aware of at least 2 students who are ESE students, and the issue came to our attention in December when Renaissance contacted Mr. Tomlinson's department and said that because the students were not formally enrolled and in Skyward, they could not access the students' IEPs. So we are investigating what that means, and because the students have been there since August, so we are currently investigating as to what services they were receiving when the school did not have access to their IEP and theoretically did not know what services they should be providing to those students. So we only know of 2. We're, again, investigating to see if there are more of the students. Renaissance, as of last week, admitted that they have 13 students on campus that are not formally enrolled. And we are trying to dig into and get more information on that.
Mr. Ingersoll?
I was just concerned about the safety of the campus, like the demand on the lunchroom and stuff like that,
Those are issues.
We evaluated that as a school district, because obviously this charter school is running amok with no supervision from any of the board members. And somewhere we might have to step in and do an analysis of the safety and welfare of the students there. Maybe spend millions of dollars to make sure our campus is safe.
Regarding and Brian is here. Brian, and I don't catch you off guard.
Let's start Brian.
But we do, I'll let Brian address the issue regarding what you had to do for all of our school centers as well as the
Well, I know you
charter.
have, but I'm just saying from an overall different perspective, I mean, are these kids eating in classrooms, or are these kids eating in
Okay,
hallways?
so he wouldn't know that, but I'm just saying, what we've done for the charter schools as far as school safety and the perimeter and those kinds of things, we've done the same thing for them as we do for our own school centers. But then as far as the physical plant impact is what you're referring to about cafeterias and this and that, we don't have any information on that I'm aware of.
One, we have that's not within our purview to oversee. Throughout the state, there are charter schools that are in strip malls and all kinds of crazy facilities, and that the state has deemed it that the local school boards do not have jurisdiction to police that. So that's not really an issue that we can investigate. That's up to the parents to determine whether or not the facility meets their qualifications. So our hands are tied when it comes to that.
But when it comes to special needs kids, we've walked into liability with federal law.
Yeah, as we are jointly potentially liable because we are the local education agency. So for federal dollars, we oversee that, and so there's joint liability between the charter school and the school district, even though we don't have any control over the day-to-day activities of what the charter school does.
So a special needs kid may not make it to the cafeteria, but that's okay.
That would be an issue for the parents to take up with the charter school. Yeah.
I'm clear of it.
Madam Chair.
Ms.
You know, I'm still haunted by when we closed Toussaint Charter School in the Orange Blossom Mall. And I had visited because I knew one of the people who was heading up that school and saw 2 or 3 teachers that I had known from Lincoln Park when my daughters attended there that were let go for different reasons, and they were teaching there. And I knew some of the reasons, and I was concerned about that because I thought, this isn't a good fit. But I was more concerned because I met 2 little girls that were Down syndrome children and kind of found out through the grapevine that those children had not received services, not on Mr. Tomlinson's. It wasn't anything that we did not do correctly. It was that the school had not followed through. And these were federal violations, and yet I don't see the federal government stepping in. There's always two sets of rules, and we keep saying parental choice, parental choice. Well, obviously, the parents must not understand, are not educated, are we not getting out the information somehow? But these are issues of children with special need, and I think that crosses a line into a violation of their contract with us, and it puts us in an area of liability that I'm not comfortable with a student that has special needs being warehoused and their IEP not being addressed. Whether they're okay with it or not, or whether our governor and our legislature turned a blind eye to charter schools, I don't see how we can.
And Ms. Hilton, clearly the superintendent agreed with you, which is what prompted the
The letter.
direction to send the letter, because it had escalated to a higher level when we were dealing with ESE kids, as opposed to, over the years, the 2 or 3 kids that were warehoused there that staff tried to work out. So that's what prompted the letter, and I think it speaks for itself as to what the school board's position is.
And since we're liable partially for these special needs students, are we legally able to contact the parents to make sure they have a good understanding of where their child is on that scale of being a warehouse student?
Dr. Mills, that's an excellent question.
Let me,
One of those things we'll look into.
Visit somebody.
I mean, as I think Dr. Prince mentioned, when on the out-of-field issue, we are posting the out-of-field teachers for the charter schools on our website. We're allowed to inform parents that way, even though the law doesn't require the charter schools to post it on their websites. There's nothing that prevents us from providing that information. But the reasons why a parent may choose to have their child go to the charter school are up to the parents. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't then, if they don't go to the charter school, that they would go to the public school. Some charter school parents homeschool as an alternative, or they go to a private school. So I'm not sure it would be within our purview to start knocking on doors and providing them with that information. At some point, the parents have a responsibility to understand what their child is and is not getting from the school.
Madam Chair, part of my, I guess, conundrum on this is I am amazed that any charter school, knowing their business models, would have anybody in their doors that they're not going to pull down money for. And so the back reason for that is going to be very interesting to discover, because they, as a rule, are not philanthropists.
Madam Chairman, I just want to thank the superintendent and Jonathan and your staff for bringing this forth. And, you know, everybody knows I hate lawsuits and I hate getting into the legal aspect. This is serious
This is
business.
serious stuff.
And you know, we take it seriously, particularly when kids' safety and welfare and education is involved. So whatever we have to do,
And we're liable
and
to.
we're liable almost for anything we say and do anymore. But we, you know, we seriously have to look at, you know, holding back their charter. When's it up again? Not 3 more years?
The Renaissance St. Lucie was renewed in 2018. So they've got another 3 years.
We really need to start laying the line and saying, hey, this is unacceptable. Do business in our county, we won't be doing it much longer.
May I ask, Madam Chair, sometimes I get the feeling that we know a contract is a contract, and I think some other entities take it as a suggestion. And, you know, I think this is beyond that, though. This is something much more serious.
Thank you, gentlemen, for answering our questions and bringing it forward.
We're going to move over now to, last week, the governor made an announcement regarding the, what they're going to call the Florida BEST, the B-E-S-T standards. And so that's relatively new, and it's going to be going through the legislature. But I just wanted to have Dr. Wild come up and give the board members a little bit of an update on she's kind of looked at it in detail, her and some of her staff. So, Dr. Wild.
Yes.
I gave you a clicker.
Good morning, board members, Madam Chair, Superintendent Gent. Pleased to be here this morning. What you've been handed is part of the press release that came out on Friday. And so some of the details we don't have exactly clear yet, but we know a lot from, not only from keeping up with it all along throughout the entire timeline, but also Liz Pruitt served on a state committee of only 6 people to help finalize the math standards. So we got a lot of insight from her participation. She is here as well in case we have questions for her. With that being said, today I just want to highlight some of the changes that are coming through, clarify the status of some of them, because I think the press release makes some of them sound like they're already completed, and they're not. They are proposals. And then leave time for a discussion if needed. Starting with the English language arts changes, they worked to try to make the standards clearer to parents and to teachers. So they did that partially through separating multiple skills. There were multiple skills within every standard previously with the Florida standards. And so now there will be more standards with isolated skills in English and math. They have included a book list, an ELA book list and a civics book list to go along with these new English language arts standards, incorporating the recommended book list right into the standards. That's never been done before. Part of that was an increase on the classics. That is causing some debate right now in school districts and across the state as to the diversity that will be presented through those classics and the current relevance. Definitely a place for it. We welcome the classics, but we have to see exactly what the book list looks like, and I believe all that will be released Friday. There will be a major focus on reading and writing. I mentioned the civics reading list already. The U.S. Constitution, they make a point of saying that will be introduced in 5th grade. That, just for clarification, that means in ELA, it is already introduced in 5th grade through social studies, but now it'll also be part of ELA rather than waiting till 11th grade for ELA. They're moving rhetoric down to 6th grade instead of waiting till high school. That will help students with their ability to write argumentative writing skills. I mentioned that they're making the standards more concise, which means there'll be more of them, but they will have single skills rather than multiple. They are bringing back cursive writing, introducing it in 3rd grade with mastery in 4th. That has been missing for some time. They're incorporating secondary reading, fundamental reading strategies into the ELA standards. Currently, they are only in separate courses, intensive reading. They will be incorporated into ELA with the expectation that the ELA teacher would differentiate and have standards to utilize for that. Vertical and horizontal alignment means they are trying to clarify for teachers and parents how topics relate to each other within a grade level and across grade levels. That was present in the Florida standards, but we had to do a lot of training and work to identify that. So their goal was to make that clearer. And within the ELA resources, or within the ELA standards, they are planning on integrating teacher resources, glossaries, and tools. As a district, we have been doing that ourselves. We've created toolboxes for teachers that provide that, and now that is part of the work in ELA at the state level. And we did have some of our curriculum folks on various committees. Mathematics we know more about due to Liz's participation. They are bringing back explicit requirement for memorization of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That was not part of Florida standards, and we're actually in favor of that change. There are going to be, although you don't really see it highlighted in these documents, they are going to be introducing a new high school math pathway. For many years now, the only pathway has been up to Algebra 2. And so that pretty much narrowed the math choices that students could take. Now they're going to expand that to have more financial literacy math pathway, career-related math pathway, bringing back some of those courses that we had many years ago, and also including statistics in that new pathway. I'm sure we will have involvement in developing that. They are also bringing back all of the financial literacy standards back into high school math. They were removed many years ago. They were put in social studies, so they're going back into math, including into algebra. They're simplifying the standards in math the same way that they set out to do for ELA, and simplified the wording. I already talked about what the alignment is within a course. They are putting a glossary of terms and illustrations within the standards and the tools that the teachers will have. They are bringing back basic whole number arithmetic so that it's completed by the end of 5th grade instead of moving into 6th grade to help students get that foundation earlier. And most people don't realize that previously the Algebra and Algebra 2 standards were not clarified by course. They were just algebra standards, and we had to decide where they fit. Now they will be explicitly within the appropriate course title. That will be helpful in providing that statewide clarification. But in those documents, they also added a lot of general changes that will go along with these recommended standard changes. And you will notice that it often says 2020 legislation. Those are all proposals that are currently in the works right now. And some of these are repeated because I have a separate slide for assessments, but 2021, all students will have an opportunity to take the SAT or ACT for free. As you know, we already do that because we have a College Board partnership. So our students already take the SAT for free. This is new. SAT and ACT results will count in the school grade, but no earlier than 22-23. We'll go back to that. We have no idea how they will count because of how they are going to be administered. For example, there is no required score for graduation. It is not a graduation test. So that's a little unclear in your documents. SAT, ACT will be in the future required for students to take, but they will not be their graduation requirement. So there will be no set score that they have to get. We will be eliminating the geometry EOC and the grade 9 ELA FSA if this proposal passes in 22-23, which would make next year the last year for administering those tests. In 2021, no, 21-22, 2 years from now. There's also a new Florida Civics Literacy Test, which is really the 100-question citizenship test, plus some additional questions. That all students will be required to take in their senior year. Again, it is not a graduation requirement. And right now, there's no indication that that will count in the school grade. A couple years ago, they did pass legislation that requires students to take this test in college and requires them to pass it in college. If they pass it in high school, they will not have to retake it in college. That's the incentive for high school students at this point. And this year, they're going to make that test available to us. If we want to voluntarily administer it to learn what the test is all about, we have that option as a district. A change to 3rd grade FSA, they're going to change the test itself in 22-23 to focus on reading only. So right now, 3rd grade does not have a writing component, but it does have language and editing. We don't have item specs to know exactly what that will look like, but there will be a change to the 3rd grade test. This seems a little bit unrelated to come out in this press release, but they've also added a graduation requirement. If it passes, there's a lot of controversy around this one. 2021, students would have to fill out the FAFSA application as a graduation requirement. So that is the one that parents have to provide tax documents if you're going to college. But this would be for all students, but there's a parent opt-out. So we don't usually have a parent opt-out for a graduation requirement, so that's unusual legislation. We'll have to follow that one more closely.
Fill that out, give their finances up.
The student and the parent would have to complete it. Currently, we do night,
The parent doesn't want to do that.
right,
Well, if I may, with the new Parent Bill of Rights bill,
yes.
a parent will have the right to opt out, and it will not be able to affect their graduation.
Right.
So it's useless.
Yeah, so this one, I don't know if this one is going to pass. It is hard work right now to get our college-bound students to fill this out on time, get their parents to come in. We do many, many nights to help with that, so this one could be a challenge. This also would require that report cards are ready and distributed in 1 week after the school year, with the exception of any student that was taking a class that had an EOC test or a state test that had not returned yet. That means some kids would get their report cards and some students wouldn't. In 2020 legislation, they are also talking about streamlining all of the assessments, all of our assessments. Shorter passages, it says passes, fewer questions, and getting the all math and the 5th grade science test done in a single day. It's currently a 2-day test. That would leave only one test that spans over 2 days. So they are trying to have shorter tests, fewer questions. That has ramifications too, though. That means fewer standards would be able to be assessed. So we would,
Yeah, but what kid wants to sit all day and take 2 tests?
well, they're going to shorten the test. They're saying it won't take 2 days because they're going to shorten the length of it. Again, we don't have item specs yet to tell you exactly.
Logical.
I then took some of the timelines that are in there and pulled them out separately so you could see. For both ELA and math, right now, we're at January 2020. They are rolling out the standards and bringing them to the state board in February or March. They're going to begin work on revising the course code directory as needed and course descriptions. When we look just at ELA, now this is important. These distinctions are important for us in terms of how it's going to impact instructional materials, training, and instruction itself. So the adoption process, the publishers will begin in April 2020. They're being notified now of all the changes they need to make, and they're substantial to ELA. The adoption process will take place over the course of next year. 2021, which is on the bottom, we will begin professional development across the state. And my understanding is DOE is going to create the professional development modules so that it's standardized across the state. They did not do that with the previous rollout. 21-22 is when we will implement the standards. That means that we'll have the instructional materials by then, we'll start teaching on the new standards, and the assessments will have changed by that date. 21-22 will be the last administration of the 9th grade ELA assessment that students currently take in 9th grade. And professional development will continue because as new materials come out, professional development will continue into 2023. For math, it's the same thing, it's just a different looking slide. We are a year later in math. So there's a lot of attention to math, but actually ELA is going first. So the math adoption will not start till the spring of next year. Teacher professional development will begin in 2021. 22-23 is when we will change our math instruction and our math materials and our assessments. And then in 22-23, that same year, the geometry EOC will be discontinued. And it says in lieu of SAT, which will not be a graduation requirement. Geometry EOC itself is currently not a graduation requirement. And professional development will continue. So that's the timeline. We do have time to change all of our local materials, adopt new materials, ELA first, mathematics second. 2021, next year, all of our 11th grade students will be offered the opportunity to voluntarily take SAT, ACT. Now this affects other districts more than us because we already do it. 2021, all 12th grade students will be required to take the Florida Civics Literacy Test. Not required to pass it, not a graduation requirement, but they will need to take it. 22-23, the 9th grade FSA and geometry will be discontinued, and SAT, ACT administration will become a graduation requirement. So taking it is a requirement, passing it is not. So that is the overview of the best standards, their new name, the best standards, as well as the legislation that they are tying to it. That is a lot, and we will be going over this with the principals as well, maybe in more detail. But do you have any questions?
Madam Chair, the cursive writing.
Yes.
I noticed that one of the students that we work with at the school has already started that, and it was on her report card. So I'm a little confused about, because the other students have, I don't remember seeing that on their report cards. So explain to me what's going on right now, if you know,
When you say it was on her report card, was it
as a grade,
as a grade, and was she in a St. Lucie Public School?
yes.
Okay.
So in third grade it is currently.
Come on up, Liz, and have a chair.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know there was mention of it in third grade previously.
Third grade, it is currently required that students are exposed to cursive. However, the changes within the standards require students to be able to write legibly by fourth grade within those standards for cursive. So they're introduced to it in third, and currently we are introducing it in third. But the change with the best standards is that they're required to write legibly for,
In other words,
in
mastery.
cursive.
Mastery was not a requirement.
Correct.
Okay, so now we have to get some cursive posters up there, because, you know, she's coming to us, but then she's not coming with a poster or something that she can practice with, and she didn't do very well. So that's why I'm bringing that up based on, now I know what's going on with the state.
And part of the rationale behind that as well is that original source documents are also part of these standards, and they've always been part of our instruction here. But some of the original source documents are in cursive, and the students couldn't read them.
Okay,
At least
the
not
other-
easily.
The other one I wanted to talk about was the memorization of multiplication tables. That's a good one, because that's what we're finding after school, is that the students are struggling in math because they have not memorized their multiplication, so that's a good one.
Also, on a more general, broader scope, students don't have the requirement to memorize a lot of things these days. They don't memorize phone numbers anymore, so just memorization skills in general, and requiring that in mathematics will help with that as well.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Ms. Hensley? I'll be interested to see what they think is classic literature and how broad it is. As you know, some people think it's only European, American literature, where there's actually classics coming from all over the world. So I'll be very interested to see how they actually define and refine that.
Yes, that is the topic of a lot of conversation, including on social media right now.
Madam Chair, Ms. Hilton's just excited that Governor DeSantis did away with Common Core.
Common Core is all over. Yeah, I thought he did.
So, Madam Chair, I'd love to be in charge of the Office of Oxymoronic Terminology.
So we have a generation of kids that can't write, we have a generation, a gap of kids that cannot write cursively and cannot read. How do we, I'm wondering if the colleges will address that, because they've gone out of K-12 and they can't read or write cursively. Do they have a backup plan?
No, I don't know that they see it as essential at the university or college level at this time, so I have seen nothing about incorporating it at the
Higher
university
ed.
level.
It's only important when they try to sign your check.
Yes.
That's it, exactly.
Because they just slide their card
and pay
for it that way.
If you've ever tried to read a judge's writing, that's why they use a typewriter.
Curious.
I want to,
Any other questions?
I wanted to thank Liz and some of the other team, but Liz was trekking all over the state for the math standards, and we were concerned that there might be some surprises that may not be in our best interest, but so we'll continue to, the legislation is the key, whether it gets included in legislation or not, and so, and I know that we'll be working with Fern and Nicole, and you all will as well, with contact to make sure that we have we thoroughly review it, and we have our input in that. But I did want to thank Liz for what she's done. This kind of segues right into the next portion, really, we talk about a little bit of legislation. While Helen's at the table, if she can just take a second to give you a brief overview. She only had an hour to do this morning. And I have this is what Vern sent out
Yeah.
to you all this morning. You all received those.
Yeah,
But I just wanted her to just take a couple seconds to summarize on early learning, and then go into, I know Mrs. Hensley was in Tallahassee, and this, give a report on that, and then at the conclusion of that, we'll go to our executive session.
Yes, thank you. Actually, yesterday, Gail Harrell's bill passed the Senate, and that's 1688. But actually,
Committee.
the committee. But actually, Erin Grahl is the lead on this bill with House Bill 1013. And her bill, she'll be presenting that today and tomorrow, I believe. And essentially, the whole first part of the bill is referring to the fact that the Office of Early Learning will be moved to and be located in the Department of Education. So it becomes part of the Department of Education. Whenever they refer to the K through 20 education code, they are now changing it to call it the Early Learning to 20 education code. There are a lot of changes in this bill, and I did just start tearing it apart, and it is a very large bill. But even her bill, even though she starts presenting it today, she is still taking stakeholder feedback and making changes as it goes along. Within this bill, they talk about incorporating the class assessment within early learning and in VPK. And that assessment really looks at teacher-child interactions. So it's not just student performance, it's teacher-child interactions. There is a lot of discussion about that. They would be phasing that into VPK in a second year. The current timeline for when VPK providers, and that includes private providers and us, is quite lagging. Before they get their data to know what their status is going to be, it's too late for them to really make any changes to address how their students performed. And that's because we don't give the assessment until kindergarten, and then it gets scored, and so there's a long time between it. This is going to change the current timeline and get that data, or some data, to VPK providers within 45 days, which will allow them to have some time to make changes and have more impact on their status in the future. It would require them, if they're on probationary status and they don't perform according to the standard set, to write a school improvement plan, put a lot of steps in to address it. They may be required to adopt the curriculum that the state says they must adopt. They can ask for good cause exemptions, and that will relate to their ESE population and their ELL population. So rather than making those accommodations prior to the students taking the assessments, it would be an after-the-fact request on the part of the provider. And then the State Board of Education would get a report on how many VPK providers needed to request and were granted good cause exemptions. Let's see, good cause.
That's good.
There is one more important thing I saw in here, and that is there is a provision in here also for extending progress monitoring, screening and progress monitoring from the VPK grade level to third grade. So that is new and impacts the district in a much broader way. Don't have a lot of details, don't know if this part will stay in it, but it does require that students do progress monitoring VPK through grade 3 times a year. We do our own already with iReady, so we do have that data. No details as to whether or not those tests would still be allowed, or we'd have to use a prescribed test from the state. But those would be reported. Not sure if they would be incorporated in school grade. There is some reference to them being included in accountability, so I'm not sure what that will look like. But it also says that those students must be notified of their deficiencies coming into kindergarten out of VPK and provided with a remedial experience in the summer, and it says we may use our reading funds to do that. It doesn't say we must, it says we may, but that implies that the cost of that would fall to the school districts. So we'll be following this and the companion bill in the House very closely.
So we met with a significant number of people in November on these issues and on early learning specifically, and gave some suggestions, which of great measure they were accepted, which I'm pleased with. The days in the legislature, we had the privilege, thanks to Ms. Hawley last year, who started a new thing where we get a room in the Senate, and they come to us. So we have the opportunity to speak to 8 representatives, 6 senators. Mr. Corcoran was there, Jacob Oliva, who's the chancellor, as well as an hour-and-a-half meeting with Shan Goff, Office of Early Learning. The concerns we had previously was that they were going to use a broad stroke. So at a preschool that took kids that had significant issues and needed more time, all that sort of thing, were going to be treated as the same way as an age, that didn't take anybody but the top kids. So that was our ongoing conversation. That was part of the big conversation, as a matter of fact, with all these people. The movement of the organization of Office of Early Learning under Department of Education has some concerns. VPK is academic, that's fine. 0 to 4, we stress strongly, is targeted play, nurturing, that sort of thing. And a couple of the people we talked to did not understand that difference. So what we have requested was that whatever you do, make sure that there's an understanding that with the Department of Education, and then give the autonomy to the Office of Early Learning to treat school readiness somewhat differently than VPK because of their different missions. Most people nodded their heads, but I think some of them didn't quite know what we were talking about, basically. So we did have an opportunity to talk to a lot of people, walk a lot of holes. The bill that you just quoted from Senator Harrell was like 148 pages.
Yes, this is it.
One of the other bills that we were presented was 174 pages. So the question of the sponsor of that bill is, do you know what actually is on page 7 of your bill? And of course, the answer was no. Well, let us help you understand what that actually means. So we have, the bills that we are following is this packet. These are bills that we're following. These are just the education bills that we're following. We are following other bills because they impact kids, such as some health issues, some transportation issues, that sort of thing. We have asked for funding for a full day for VPK. The response is we were going to get, I think, $49.82 increase in per student funding, which does not give us the flexibility to take our preschool centers, our VPK centers, to a full day. However, the discussion was more positive this year than ever. Mr. Corcoran answered a lot of questions. The chancellor came in next and said that, I know that you heard what Mr. Corcoran said, but this is what he really meant, which I found quite entertaining. But he was much more willing to answer questions that he knew we wouldn't agree with. And he did, I think he did answer them much more clearly than he had. I think he has a better understanding of potentially what his job is. The governor's presentation, I gave you a copy of this, just so you know. Dr. Hamilton tends to be always a skeptic. Wendy Dodge tends to be always on the rosy side of life. So they were a good balance. And so this document tells you where they're going to be moving the money around for the new teacher pay concept. So the governor's budget is applauded with concerns. And we did have a significant conversation about school safety, regarding that we may be missing the mark because of the number of boys who are committing suicide with guns. So that was an interesting conversation. That was an aha moment for some of our elected officials in Tallahassee, that they don't think that they quite understood what the psychological aspects of some of the issues regarding our children are about. But everybody seems to nod their head on increased money for mental health. They did talk about having higher level of accountability, and they mentioned several times that it would include charter schools. So on this document, you have where they're going to move the money around. where they're gonna take it from, where they're gonna put it. There was very little actual new money. Every silo, that was their word, not mine, every silo, which means every committee, was given a number that they had to find within, whether it be transportation or wherever, number they had to find to put in a different silo to meet the governor's request. So we will find out what goes on, but the conversations were much more positive this year than, and I've been doing it for a long time, much more positive this year than ever regarding the willingness to ask questions about, I don't understand, could you explain it to me? That sort of thing. So, especially when we explained to them, and St. Lucie County got a standing ovation for organizing the room, which, by the way, it was organized, okay, by St. Lucie County. It is that we have more than 50% of the kids, the consortium has more than 50% of the kids in the state, in our public schools, and we represent more than 50% of the voters. And I think that's what drove so many people to say, sure, I'll take that appointment. The only disappointment we had was with one senator that we had an appointment, and she is a key senator. And the unfortunate thing was we got to her office, because she didn't want to come to us. We got to her office early, and some other entity came in and co-opted our time, and she said, I don't have time for you guys, and walked right on by. So that was disappointing, and I will be not sending her a thank you note for her time. But by and large, the rest of it was very positive. And conversation, the school board association, superintendents, everybody seems to be much more cohesive than we have seen for quite a long time. So I'm very skeptical, as you know. However, I am very encouraged, at least by what I consider to be real dialogue.
Well, our thanks to you, Ms. Hensley, for representing this board up there and for all the good work that you did.
Thank you.
Any other questions of this segment of our?
No, we will, when we adjourn here, we'll go upstairs, and it'll be just the board and the attorney on in the shade meeting. We had, I don't see him here, Glenn Riles is leaving town and had some artwork that he wanted to bring and present.
Want me to
You can explain
give
that.
the story? Okay. Glenn Riles was vice president of GL Home until he retired and took his boat to Maine. Okay. But in his previous life, he is an artist, and he owned a very high-end art gallery in Miami. So he is someone that, for different committees, and I said, oh, we got to know quite well. He donated a piece of art to the county government, and of course, I said, of course, you'll be donating one to the school district. I don't know what it looks like. I told him what I wanted out of his storage unit. But I do know that his artwork goes for about $10,000 and above. So it is a significant gift, and he is in town for a short period of time. But he is a person who is extremely positive about what St. Lucie County is doing, especially when it comes to what we're doing for the arts and our kids in school.
Okay. At this time, then, we're going to recess the public meeting, and the board will commence a private attorney-client session, the estimated length of which is about 30 minutes. The names of the people attending that session are as follows. The 5 members of the School Board of St. Lucie County, Mr. E. Wayne Gent, Superintendent, Jonathan Ferguson, Esquire, Executive Director of Legal Services, and Dan Harrell, School Board Attorney. At the conclusion of that private session, we will come back here and adjourn the meeting formally.